My whole life, my dad did this business before I was born. It's actually how we met my mother. And when I was a kid, almost every Christmas and birthday or special event, or if I did something that deserved a reward, he would buy me a box of model lead soldiers. So what you're seeing in these cabinets is basically my whole childhood of collecting soldiers with my dad, and he would focus me on different major battles. So this one here is the Battle of Waterloo, and this is the French and the English. And what's neat about this is that they're using equipment that we sell today. So for instance, they have Brown Bess muskets, cavalry sabers, Shakos. All these things are things that we actively sell and search for and research and test fire. We have the Civil War, so we sell lots and lots of Civil War firearms, from Springfield muskets to Colt revolvers, Remington revolvers, Sharps rifles, cavalry sabers, kepis. I mean, all different kinds of material. Over here is World War II, and there's lots of stuff. There's a Browning machine gun, a Garand, Thompson submachine guns, MG42. There's a Flak 88. Over here is the Zulu War. So this is the Battle of Rorke's Drift that occurred in 1879 in January. And these soldiers, the British soldiers, are holding Martini Henry Mark II rifles. My father actually went to the Kingdom of Nepal and bought about 10,000 of them in 2003, and we still sell those today. Even as a kid, I was learning all about these things, and I never thought I'd work with my dad. I had no interest in it. It wasn't until I was in my mid-20s that I thought, oh, that would actually be a cool business, but my way into it was the website. I was interested in the internet and e-commerce. But the cool thing is I had all this knowledge that I didn't realize I had from collecting toy soldiers. In fact, my dad, before I was in the business, did a big deal with the producers of Saving Private Ryan, and specifically the armorer, Simon Atherton at Zorg, and we wound up supplying the vast majority of the machine guns for the film. And I believe it was a few hundred machine guns that we provided, but I didn't do the deal, my dad did, but there was a lot of our equipment and bayonets and other types of hard goods, and there were a lot of military antiques companies that helped them. They filmed in England, so the first part of my father's business began in England, and then he came to America, and then he had both for a while, and then we shut England down about 15 years ago.
And can you name other movies that you supplied?
We had equipment in Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, Valkyrie, what's the Brad Pitt movie?
Fury.
Oh, Fury, Dunkirk. I mean, one of the most recent things we did, which is really funny, is John Wick 3, I think it is. An opening scene where he's in New York City Keanu Reeves is running through the city, and he's trying to get away from these, bad guys. And he jumps into a warehouse, and it's a military antique warehouse. Yeah. Well, it's all our stuff. They came here, the set dresser came here, took photos of everything and said, I really want to do this and this and this. And I was like, we don't want to rent stuff. We'll just buy it. He goes, all right, I'm gonna make you an offer to rent stuff. We'll have it 60 days. We're gonna tag everything. Everything's gonna come back. And he was great. He was actually, everything came back for the most part. None of it was damaged. And so when you look in that scene, there's a Vickers machine gun that's all camouflage. I mean, all of that stuff is ours for the most part.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
That's impressive. I also kind of related with movies, Stalingrad by Bondarchuk. Yeah, I was a reenactor in that movie with my friends and with some viewers here on this channel. It was pretty fun to be filmed there, but it's really hard work with all this stuff, with blank weapons. So I understand what you're saying, especially about this MG42. When just regular actors cannot use it properly, so they need specialists.
So I didn't tell that whole story. So basically, there's that opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. There's a gun in the bunker shooting down at the Allied forces as they land at Normandy, and they hired a regular actor to do it, but you only see him from the back. And as anyone would do, it's a machine gun. You push the trigger and you hold it down, right? And you think, that's what my job is. But with a blank fire machine gun, it doesn't generate the same type of blowback to make it cycle correctly sometimes. So if you just hold the trigger down, it was just going and the jamming and fouling up. So finally, the guy who Simon, who basically one of our guys assisting them, he could do it. And finally, the story goes, I wasn't there, but the story goes, Spielberg said, okay, forget it. We can't back all the extras up and storm the beach again. Just let this guy fire it, put him in a German uniform.
Yeah.
So that's what happened.
That's a nice story, and it reminds me a story about like filming 1944. You know this movie, and it has been filmed in Estonia, and I also has been involved.
Right.
Yeah, I operated flamethrower. Yes, with friend of mine, and actually there was also MG42, but it was not actually MG42. It was MG3 with special blank waffen for blank fire. It was so comfortable. So guys, reenactors enjoyed a lot by those stuff, because military guys came, just put it on the positions and let
the actors take it.
Actors. Yeah, it was so cool.
That's cool. Oh, you know, I never showed you this one. This is one of my favorite pieces we have right now. So we have a couple of full-time buyers in the United States and one in the UK. And their job basically is just to find collections and unique pieces and buy them for resale. Our guy in the UK during COVID sent us some photos of this cannon, just the tube. We just made the base so we could get it off the ground. Showed us pictures of this cannon, but it was in a very dark warehouse, and this whole back was it wasn't mud, but it was like grease, dry grease. You couldn't really see any of the markings. Now, we didn't know exactly what the cannon was, but we knew it was good enough to buy it. And the biggest telltale was the dolphins here. This kind of dates it to a specific age in the 18th century, and we know it's European. But again, we didn't know exactly where it was from. Because it was COVID, it took about 18 months to get it, because shipping freight was very, very expensive. So we didn't want to do it at the height of the expensive freight, so we waited. So we got it in the summer of, I think, 2022. And one of the first things we did when we got it is we looked at this cipher, and we couldn't figure out exactly what it was. Now, here's a crown, so it would indicate that it's royal, but this, we didn't know if it was, you know, an H or an R or a 2. Then this channel here was all packed with dried muck. And I got some solvent and a brass brush and just carefully, over a course of probably 45 minutes to an hour, cleaned it out. And the thing on this side is what got me excited. It says 1768.
Wow.
So 1768 puts it right in the time of the American Revolution, pre-American Revolution. And we know it's not English. So one of our researchers took it upon himself to find what this cipher was. And it turns out that it's an F2, which is for Frederick II of Hesse and Kassel. Now, Frederick II was the uncle to King George III. King George III is the King of England during the American Revolution, and he has a problem. He doesn't have enough resources to fight the colonists because he's got soldiers all over the world. So he goes to his uncle and says, look, you're not, fighting anyone. Lease me your soldiers. And he does. And the Hessians come to the colonies, and 2,000 of them garrison in Trenton, New Jersey. And on the morning of December 26, 1776, George Washington crosses the Delaware, has his first major victory of the American Revolution, and takes prisoner 2,000 Hessian soldiers. They have 8 cannons there that day, 4 this size and 4 smaller. I'm not saying this gun was used at the Battle of Trenton, but one identical to it almost certainly was. It gave me chills when I saw that, and it's indisputable that it is what it is. It absolutely is nothing but authentic. You couldn't make something like this today without being easily able to tell. And it frankly wouldn't be worth it. It'd cost more to make it, I think, than it would be to sell it. But it's still just a really, really cool piece of history that was almost a total surprise to us.
This business full of surprises, right?
Yeah, it is full of surprises. And it was really fun to fire it too. So a lot of what we sell are antique guns and some cannons. So this was a cannon that I have actually fired. One of the reasons I love it is that it's 1763. So you can see the date here. And this insignia is the Dutch East India Company. So at the time, they had one of the largest standing armies and navies in the world. It was made in Amsterdam and by Peter Seest. So it's just really cool to track something and go, wow, that's almost 300 years old. It was, who knows what ships it was on, what oceans it traveled. And I fired it a couple years ago.
And actually my native city, St. Petersburg, has been adopted only like 60 years before this
right.
has been produced.
And so all these guns are waiting to go on to the website or waiting restoration. And same with these. So they're not yet on the website yet. You know, we have flintlock pistols, Colt revolvers, all different types. So that you're ranging here from about mid-1700s to the 1880s.
Naval door.
Yeah, that's like the submarine door. So we have some ordnance in here, deactivated machine guns, some original sabers from Victorian era, a yard full of stuff, parts for the machine guns and different guns. These are all Martini Henrys. Down here, I got a bunch of helmets out of Finland and Estonia, I think in 2012 or 13, about 10 years ago. Basically, some of these helmets will have German markings from World War II on the side, where we're accustomed to seeing them. We got samples sent to us by a dealer in Helsinki, and they look good. And he said, well, I have 35,000 of them. So my dad and I flew to Helsinki, nicest guy, met us for dinner one night with his 2 kids and his wife. And he said, so tomorrow we go to Estonia. And I was like, we go to Estonia? He goes, oh yeah, it's a ferry ride. It's 2 hours. You'll love Tallinn. So we meet him at the ferry. We didn't know we were going there. We get off. There's some guys waiting for us in a Hummer. They take us about an hour outside of Tallinn towards the Russian border. In a giant warehouse are these cages full of helmets. So we call these the M40-55. The reason we call them that is because some of them are German M40 helmets and some are M55 helmets. They were both made by Hans Romer in Germany on the same machines. The M55s those are Hungarian, but the M55s have a slightly telltale way to know if they were, and it has to do with the vent hole. Some of them look very fat, and then the M40s, true M40s, will be marked on the inside. So when I got to this warehouse, there are 35,000 helmets, so about 200 of these pallet cages. They were stacked, so I climbed up and I skipped across the top, and I would just dig my hand in and go, all right, are there any letter codes over here above the left ear? Cool. And about 1 in 10 helmets had the codes. And I was like, okay, well, that's enough. If that's true, then that's enough to make this deal work. So we bought them, and we bought them at less than we pay to make a reproduction M40 from Asia. We sell them now for about $50, and we sell about 10 a day. But before we did the deal, and it was an expensive deal, I was freaking out. My dad had done deals like this most of his life, but I was, early 30s, and like, I had never spent that much money in my life, and I didn't want to screw it up. And I said, Dad, don't you understand, if we sold 1 a day, we're going to be doing this for 90 years? Luckily, it's 10 a day, so, it's more like, it'll be more than 9 years, but we're 10 years in, and we've sold over half of the inventory.
Oh, yeah. And this actually describes how all these items that was like just regular helmets on every Finland antique store, how they disappear, because it's like 10 a day. You already sold half of them for like 10 years, so next 5 years, it's totally disappeared.
Probably gone, yeah. We're out of a lot of the sizes of them. And I failed to mention that they went from Germany to Finland. So the Finnish army used these helmets from about late 1950s all the way up to the late 1980s. And then our contact in Finland bought them, and it was cheaper to store them in Estonia than Finland, so he rented a warehouse in Estonia, and that's where he put them. Back here is a pretty cool piece. So this is a German field cannon from 1915. Now, at the time, outbreak of World War I, this was the most common field gun in the German military's arsenal. And this one was restored really nicely. We did have to cut the breech back here, so this is a legal thing. We have to cut the breech ring. You can see, this is just thick steel that's completely flame cut all the way through. So, and then it's actually welded up, so it doesn't move. The door doesn't pop out at all. So it's totally inert, breech cut, chamber welded up, totally inert and legal to own, but it's a really beautiful piece and beautifully restored. We did not restore it, but the guy who did really knew what he was doing. And so these are really hard to come by. There's one at the Australian War Memorial. There's one at the Imperial War Museum in England. And this is, I'm sure there's some others out there, but this is the only other one I know of.
It's actually, it was a simple weapon for like that period, but they mostly destroyed it. So
right. Well, now it's totally destroyed. Yeah. So this is my dad's office. Now you're in the heart of it. My dad is in his late 70s and comes in every day, and it's fantastic to be able to work with him. As you can see, there's just stuff everywhere. It's like a hoarder, but it's all guns, all antique guns. So we have things like a pepper box from the 1870s, a volcanic pistol, which this was the predecessor to the Henry rifle, first real lever action rifle made in the United States, and then it went from the Henry to the Winchester. So we go volcanic, Henry, Winchester. So just as a gun, it wasn't a super well-designed gun because it used proprietary ammunition that didn't work very well. But as a piece of machinery, as like a mechanism, it was brilliant. So that sort of started the gun that won the West. C96 Mauser, the reason this is interesting is because it's pre-1898. So it's one of the first years of production, so it's considered an antique in the United States. And then we have percussion muskets, flintlock muskets, and all of these things are waiting to go on the newsletter. For instance, this is what goes on the newsletter this week. So Monday and Wednesday, these 12 guns will go on. So the better stuff is in the safe. This pair that I'm going to take out is on the website, but that's really, I think, the only pair in here that is. So this is a pair, and there's two of them, of matched horse pistols. And what's interesting about these is they're pretty early. They're 1640, and they're made by a gun maker named Meyer in Lyon, France. And they're nice in the sense that they have ebony and ivory inlay. They have a nice striped wood. All this scroll work is hand done. They were designed as horse pistols, and the reason we use that term is so if you're riding a horse, you have a holster on one side, a holster on another, and these stick up about that far. So in a way, it's like a presentation piece. Kind of like a man wears a really expensive watch today and he wants people to notice it. Yeah. Same idea of a French gentleman riding his horse in 1645. Everyone gets to see his beautiful pistol. But the reason these are special is that if you think about riding a horse and shooting a gun, you can get a shot off, but you're holding the reins, and to reload it, you really need to let go of the reins because you need two hands to load it from the muzzle. This gun maker in 1640 developed a system to give you a second shot.
Wow.
And look how tight that is.
That's impressive. It's like a treasure of example of machinery, actually.
Yes, yeah, it is.
And it's middle of 19th century, right?
No, 1640. 1640, 400 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, 400 years ago. I mean, 130 years before the United States was even the beginning of a nation. And then we have pieces that these are made by Darzanger, again, French, again, 17th century. But what's so special about these is the way in which they're decorated. All of this is silver wire. In order to get this silver wire, which goes incredibly thin through the contours of the wood, they have to carve the wood in channels, lay the wire down, and beat it. So this is much closer. If you can see some of this incredible detail, it's much closer to making jewelry than it is to making firearms.
Oh, yeah.
All through here. So that's why true antique gun collectors, where you're going back into the 17th century, these are the types of pieces that they look for, and why they want them is because they're not just a firearm, they're really works of art. This is our conference room, and most of the stuff in here is not for sale. It's mostly my father's personal things. The way this room works is typically there's a document and then a piece under it or next to it that's somehow related. So for instance, this is Horatio Nelson. He defeated Napoleon's fleet at the Battle of Trafalgar. So Trafalgar Square in London is basically a monument to Horatio Nelson's victory. The British were big on rewarding their officers and soldiers with rewards. One of the best known rewards is Lloyd's patriotic sword. Lloyd's Bank was in existence at the turn of the 18th and 19th century. They're still in existence today. They made these beautiful swords and gifted them to the officers to celebrate victories. Battle of the Nile in 1798, they did medallions. They did a solid bronze medallion, which went to sailors of no rank, NCOs and regular sailors. They did a solid silver medallion for any of the officers, and they did a solid gold medallion for the captains. These are all authentic, and this is handwritten by Nelson himself, and N&B stands for Nelson and Bronte, which was a combination of his titles and sort of like a nickname with his seal. Now, this document's not related to those medallions, but it is his, and so we paired that together as a display. These are one of my favorite things. This is an inventory list for Upnor Castle in Kent in 1720. At the time, the War Department in England used Upnor Castle as basically a munitions dump. So black powder, cannon, and they had a guard, reportedly about 20 men. And these 20 men were, on guard duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was their job to, make sure that the castle wasn't plundered or raided or captured because there was so much important ordnance there. These men were all issued a dragoon pistol by Freeman. And they're numbered 1 through 20, and that's 5 of the 20. So my father's been looking every auction, anything, anytime we go to a show, any auction, be on the lookout for a Freeman pistol. I've never found one. I don't think he's found one in about 25 years, but at least there's 5 of them. This is one of my favorite pieces as well. So this is the Duke of Wellington. Here is his signature, and this is all his handwriting. What's interesting about this document is it's actually in terrible condition. Like a document collector would not be happy with the fold lines and the staining and the holes. There's a reason for it. So this side is English and that side is Portuguese. And you can see he's written Lieutenant Shanahan. Now, why would the Duke of Wellington be concerned with a lieutenant? Very odd. And why would it be in English and Portuguese? Well, what he's saying is that Lieutenant Shanahan is actually an officer in the French army, and he's a double agent. So if the English or the Portuguese capture Lieutenant Shanahan, because they're allied against the French, to let him go. This is his get-out-of-jail-free card with Wellington's seal. This is also Shanahan's sword inscribed to him. And it's folded because Shanahan would have had to conceal it in his breast pocket. This is a document you can see up in the top. You see the name George. So that's King George III. He was the King of England during the Revolutionary War, America's fight for independence. And this is a commission. So it's a commission for an officer, and this is the officer's sword inscribed to him. So this is King William, all of his signed things, and this insignia or crest or cipher was for his family. We don't know if it was his sword, but it certainly was from his family.